Now we're going to discuss considerations for students with sensory issues. So the environment within a school bus can be unpredictable and difficult to cope with, particularly in children with sensory processing issues. So for example, in one study, 61 of the 82 participants who were children with autism had caregivers report that they escaped from their restraints and that this could be due to troubles tolerating harness systems. Therefore, supervision is of ultimate importance. Transportation staff can assume that inappropriate responses to such an environment may be a result of a behavioral problem rather than a non obvious sensory processing disorder. So, some sensory problems that a child may encounter in such an environment are touch, auditory, vestibular, and visual. And we're going to go into detail for each one. So, for touch, for example, the movement of the bus can cause the rubbing of the body parts against the seat. This may pose a sensory experience for students with hypersensitivity to light touch. The use of the CSRS may aid in reducing this, as well as the bus staff being educated on what can help the student. In this case, firm, sustained touch coupled with speaking the child through the experience can help establish rapport with the student. Also, sitting the student in an aisle seat can cause inadvertent touching from other students who are walking past in the aisle. This can be avoided by allowing this student to sit in a window seat, which would also allow them to lean into the window for some deep pressure. In the event of an emergency evacuation, it is imperative for staff to be fully equipped with the knowledge required to handle this type of situation with a student who has a touch sensitivity or fear. Next, we're going to discuss an auditory sensory issue. So, new sounds in a bus environment, coupled with the amplification of voices in such a tight environment, can be a problem for students with auditory sensitivities. These students may have a hard time listening to commands or instructions over the sound of everything else going on in the bus. Transportation staff should give any instructions in a moderate tone and volume and ensure that the student has fully understood what is being asked of them. It is important to use supplemental methods of communication with these students, as their comprehension may be compromised in times of stress or in an emergency situation. So, using gestures, visual cues, and signs may assist these students. Next, we're going to discuss vestibular. So, when boarding the bus, a student with vestibular disturbances such as poor balance or poor body awareness may find it difficult to walk up the steps or have fear of the height of the bus. Once again, staff awareness is key in providing additional assistance to these students. Staff can provide visual cues to these students as well as provide them with methods of alleviating the anxiety they may feel when boarding the bus. Techniques such as holding the railing with both hands may help them feel more grounded. These students would benefit from sitting in a window seat. For students who are under-responsive to movement, they may seek vestibular input with little regard to their own safety. So it is very important that these students receive hands-on supervision on and off the bus. These students' cues may need to be provided to ensure they remain in their seat compartment and not wandering around in the bus in order to feed their need for that vestibular input. Once again, in an emergency evacuation, it may be especially challenging for these students when having to exit out of the rear door or out of an emergency window. Next, we're going to discuss students with visual impairments. Students with visual impairments require extra assistance when boarding and exiting the bus. These students present with depth perception problems as well as changes in visual abilities when it becomes dark outside. So the length of the bus drive can also alter the student's ability to effectively cope with their visual impairment. This could mean providing a route modification or a different method of transportation for the student to allow the least restrictive environment possible. It is important to be aware of these students and provide them with the cues to ensure that they can become more independent when utilizing the school transportation system. All in all, to say that the biggest takeaway from this is that all transportation staff should be trained in how to recognize triggers for students with these sensory processing disorders and how to appropriately respond to the child's needs without the support of other educational team members who may not be present.